Gods are everywhere in the world of the Elder Scrolls, from the 9 Divines to the Daedric Princes, and even those who manage to ascend to godhood. Invasions, artifacts, champions, shrines, and temples are just a few ways that the Divine make their presence known. There are many systems of belief on Tamriel, with each culture having their own pantheon interpretation of gods. But what if I told you that these are just a fraction of the deities out there? There are many divine beings within the Arbis, from minor ones to powerful entities. So, sit back and relax as we delve into some of the forgotten gods of Tamriel. Worship of the divines is very prevalent in the Iliac Bay, the setting of the Elder Scrolls II, Daggerfall. In almost every town you go to, you can find some temple dedicated to a divine like Dibella or Julianos. But while traveling in the wilds of High Rock and Hammerfell, one can come across several shrines dedicated to minor deities, usually run by monks or witch covens. Many of these are from the time where lots of lore was simply tossed in from a D&D game the devs were running, and have since fallen into obscurity. A more recent interview with Ted Peterson, one of the lead developers of the early Elder Scrolls games, actually discusses these gods a bit, and he mentions that these were primarily ways to honor beta testers for the game. Still, for this video, we're going to be going over all the different types of shrines and the deities associated with them. Altars of Eric. Shrines dedicated to Eric Harad Egun, the Archmagister of the Crystal Tower, which was once the most prominent location to study the arcane arts in the First Era. The fact that he is still worshipped in shrines is indicative of the great influence he once held. Anvils of Ebonarm. These shrines are dedicated to Raymon Ebonarm, the god of war. Plenty of people have already talked about him, so I'll be brief. Most info comes from a book titled Ebonarm, which only appears in Daggerfall and Skyrim as part of the Creation Club. In it, he is described to be an imposing and muscular figure that is fully covered in ebony armor, with long red hair and piercing blue eyes. A long ebony blade is fused to his right arm, and he bears an ebony shield with the symbol of a red rose. He is said to appear in times of war, leaving behind red roses on battlefields as a symbol of his being there. There is a popular theory that the ebony warrior seen in Skyrim is perhaps a reincarnation or avatar of Ebonarm. Divad monuments. These are dedicated to Divad Hunding, the son of Frandar Hunding, the legendary sword singer and Onse, warriors capable of creating ethereal swords of energy. Having rejected the way of the sword early on in his life, he became a bard and traveled across Yokuda for many years. One day, the Emperor of Yokuda, Hira, began to persecute the sword singers, fearing their power. He sent a group of 100 soldiers to seize Divad while he was with his mother, who died in the skirmish. Divad slew 4 soldiers out of rage and escaped, going on to become a leader in the resistance against Hira, alongside his father. They both later traveled to Hammerfell during the Ragada migration, helping to clear the land of goblins. His tomb is within the Hall of Heroes, though his body is believed to lie within the region of Antiphylos. The holiday, Divad Atept, is celebrated on the 12th of Sun's Height, where the people of Antiphylos mourn his death. Kieran Theatres. Dedicated to Kieran the Bard, a figure that is the subject of many popular bedtime stories and tales told around fireplaces. Another book from Daggerfall, A Tale of Kieran, describes a story in which she is traveling through a forest and discovers a princess from a kingdom that had been turned into a grub by an evil wizard. Jode and Jone Shrines. Dedicated to Jode and Jone, another name for Maser and Secunda, the 2 moons of the night sky. In Breton culture, Secunda is known as Shandar's Sorrow, and Maser is also known as Mara's Tear, coming from the book that shares the same name. It tells the story of Shandar and Mara, a mortal who bore the same name as the deity. They were star-crossed lovers that came from 2 different villages that were at war with one another, and were forbidden from being together. When it was discovered that they planned to run away together, Shandar was set to be executed, and Mara was forced into an arranged marriage with another man. Mara ran into a nearby forest where she encountered an orc who intended to eat her. Shandar was allowed to search for Mara, and discovered and killed the orc, but not before suffering a mortal wound himself. The deity Mara, the goddess of love, took pity upon the 2, and reincarnated them as the 2 moons in the sky. Reliquaries of Sai. Dedicated to Sai, the god of luck, not to be confused with Sai Sahan. According to the book King Edward, he was born as a mortal and had a nickname, Lucky, as he seemed to spread luck to everyone he met. His own luck never seemed to apply to him, however, as he died in his first battle after becoming a soldier. In death, Ebonarm approached him and offered him immortality if he continued to exist and spread his luck everywhere. Sage Monuments. The Sage is a legendary figure among Bretons, an individual that was prophesied to be sent by the gods in order to spread guidance, knowledge, and aid. The book, The Sage, recounts his life. Born in the city of Moongard, he showed exceptional magical talent at a very young age and was quickly promoted to the rank of a full wizard at the Shornhelm Mages Guild. He was soon sent to study at the Crystal Tower, and in the subsequent journey across Hammerfell had many adventures that increased him in fame. Once he arrived at the tower, he was greeted by its leader, Esthlander, and told that his coming had been foretold and was part of his destiny. After learning everything he could, he set out to travel across Tamriel in order to seek wisdom and knowledge. He returned to his home in Moongard, offering advice and knowledge to those who seeked it from him, until the death of his parents from old age. Heart filled with sorrow, he went back to the Crystal Tower in order to conduct research on preventing aging, and was successful, making himself immortal. Eventually, the amount of people seeking him out became too unmanageable, and he fled to the Corallian Mountains, where only the most talented of mages would be able to find him. The book's Feyfolken and The Final Lesson recount stories that the sage told to two of his students. Shrines of Ephen. I briefly mentioned Ephen in my first video on obscure artifacts, and now I get a chance to talk about him in depth. We are once again looking to the book King Edward for information on this. This can get a little confusing, so bear with me. There are two Ephens, a deity and a person. The deity is a nature god referred to as the god of the wild. The person is a Dunmer known as Sephin, the brother of Morrowind of the Ra'athim clan, the king of Ebonheart. Sephin was named after Ephen, but Sephin is revered as a deity as well. After his death, Morrowind established a temple cult in his brother's memory, which quickly gained followers that began to worship him as Ephen in the city of Mournhold. Shrines to him spread as far as the Iliac Bay. Confused? Me too. His tomb was left in the tunnels underneath Mournhold, from which Jagar Tharn took the Staff of Chaos, the entire story of which can be found in my second Obscure Artifacts video. Shrines of Jephre. Jephre is actually a fairly prominent deity in lore, but he does have shrines that appear in the game, so I will briefly talk about him here. Jephre is the Breton and Altmer interpretation of Ithri, the Bosmeri god that instituted the Green Pact. To Bretons, he is the god of the forest, and was one of the first to become of the Earthbones, establishing the laws of nature. The Dunmer also believe in Jephre to a capacity, as described in the book On Jephre. The Dark Elves have a legend that Jephre walked the earth before the first day, and in the light of the stars weaved a song so beautiful that the very stars moved to its sway. Some of the stars to this very day still wink and blink in memory of the Song of Night and Darkness. Due to his influence, most, if not all elven bards pay homage to Jephre. Notorgo, the messenger god, whose name is invoked when one wishes for a letter to be delivered quickly. The spell, Feet of Notorgo, appears in both Daggerfall and Morrowind, fortifying the player's speed. There are several other shrines dedicated to deities with next to little information on them. Gen Lodges, Shrines of Jim Say, the god of music, Reliquaries of Ryan, the god of agriculture, Shelters of Fen, Shrines of Bandi, Shrines of Dugrod, Shrines of Mai, Shrines of Colwyn, the god of lore, Shrines of Vigrill, god of the sea, and Strenner Havens. In Arena and Daggerfall, characters have different sayings depending on their race. These can be interpreted as exclamations or as a kind of swear. The names mentioned by some of them could refer to different deities and saints. Here are some interesting ones. Argonians have the sayings, by the throne of Aphocles, by the lonely one, by the swamp spirit, by the mother goddess. Bretons have the sayings, by the mists, by the wolf, by the dark lord, which, interestingly enough, is one of the titles of Molag Bal. Dark elves have the sayings, by the dark ones, by the Black Maw, soul of the Black Knight, which is another name for Ebonarm, and by the Soulless One, which is a name for the Vestige, the main character of the Elder Scrolls Online. High Elves have the sayings, by the Other World, First Spirit of Tamriel, Blade of Kisimarin. Khajiit have the sayings, by the Rat God, by the Hand of Ibrahad, Devil of the Sands. Nords have the sayings by Thorig's beard, by Ulfor's hammer, by the White Wolf, Mother of the Ice, and by the Hoarfather. The Hoarfather is actually a figure with a bit of lore behind him. He was revered as a great philosopher by the ancient Nords, and his name actually comes up in many of the word walls from Skyrim. When translated, many of them begin with the lines, "Noble Nords remember these words of the Hoarfather," followed by quotes such as, "To kill in glorious war is to honor oneself. To die in glorious war is to honor all of Skyrim. Pray not for peace, for such is the wish of the weak and cowardly." The Hoarfather has been speculated to be one of the great Nord heroes, such as Ysmir, Ysgramor, or Shor. Redguards have the sayings, "Cursed Darvak," by the Guardian's blood, by the Maiden, and by Katrika. There is a holiday known as Maiden Katrika, celebrated by the people of Hagia Sophia on the second of last seed, in order to thank a warrior who once saved the region. And, last but not least, Wood Elves have the sayings, by Mysterious Curse, by Caleron's Heart, and by the Fire.